Well, what does all this mean? What about us and this book that we have around and keep with us at times? The question is, do you know the one that sent the message of this book? Do you know him personally? It's interesting, in Webster's dictionary, if you look up the word to know, it has 3 levels of the definition. The first one is to be acquainted with. The second one is to recognize, and the third is to experience. Knowledge has 3 levels. Some people are just able to recognize Jesus. You know, they see a church, they see a cross, they hear about Christmas, they hear about Easter. They just recognize him. Others are kind of acquainted with him. You know, they kind of get into it and confirm, a little baptism here and there. But you know, the only ones that go to heaven are the ones that have experienced him personally. And I think this is interesting what Webster says. He said there are 2 things you cannot know unless you have experienced them. He said they are pain and hunger. He says, if you have never been in pain and never been hungry, you cannot know them. You can experience the Eiffel Tower from afar. You can look at the Colosseum from a picture. But he said you can only experience pain and hunger. I'd like to add to the dictionary a third one. You cannot know life eternal until you've personally experienced Jesus Christ. Do you know the author of this book intimately, personally? Do you see the unshakable conviction of those 40 men who wrote it down? Do you have a similar unshakable conviction about your origin, your purpose in life, your destiny someday? Do you follow the unique message of this book? Have you bowed to the King? Are you seeking to glorify God in your life? Do you see that all truth, more truth and nothing but the truth is contained in this book? God is the author and director, and he has a great ending for those who follow him. Where do you fit? I'd like to read to you Matthew 7:20-23 before I close this in prayer. This is Jesus, who was asking a whole crowd of people by the seashore one day, and we stood there not too many weeks ago, and we thought about these very words as thousands of people were just milling and following Jesus. And he was giving out free bread, he was healing them, he was doing all this good stuff, and they couldn't get enough of it. And then he preached this sermon, and guess what? The majority of them wouldn't follow him anymore. It says in John 6 that they said, boy, that's enough of that. We're not going to, no bread's enough to hear stuff like that. You know, we don't want to hear that stuff. It bothers us. This is what he said. Therefore, by their fruits you'll know them. Not everyone that says to me, Lord, Lord, shall enter into the kingdom of heaven. That means you can go through religious liturgy and say all the right stuff at the right time. You can get confirmed. You can get anything you want externally and say all the Lord, Lord you want to say. It doesn't matter. Jesus said, not everyone that says to me, Lord, Lord, will enter the kingdom of heaven, but the one that does the will of my Father which is in heaven. And you know what? That's impossible. Did you know it's impossible to do the will of God unless you have a new heart? Unless you get a heart transplant? That's what the new birth is. A new heart I will give you. A new spirit I will put within you. It's not saying the right words. It's not being in the right place at the right time. It's intimately experiencing the great physician himself, taking out our old, wicked, hard heart and putting a brand new one inside. Jesus continues, many will say unto me in that day, what day is that? The judgment day. Lord, haven't we taught? I mean, I was a Sunday school teacher. I was a deacon. I was one of the ladies' auxiliary. Didn't I do great? I cast out demons. I did wonderful works. And I'll profess to them, I never knew you. You're acquainted with me. You can recognize me. You never experienced me. This is life eternal, Jesus said, John 17:3, that they may know thee. Know. Intimately experience. Look at the last words. Verse 23 of Matthew 7. Depart from me, you that work iniquity. If you've never been saved from sin, you've never been saved from hell. I went to visit one of our businessmen the last couple of weeks. He said, you want to see hell? I said, what do you mean? He said, come here. He took me over this little tiny peephole going into this gigantic, several-story high furnace. He said, you know what my industry is? He says, I buy the sulfur from the oil wells, from the refineries. He said, I put it in this great big tank farm and I melt it. at 280 degrees. And he says, and I pump it into this big furnace. He said, and I burn it. He said, when you look through that peephole, he says, you're looking into a lake of burning fire, sulfur, and brimstone. He said, it's liquid brimstone burning. Tell you what, it was an eerie sight to look through that little tube into that cauldron of burning liquid sulfur, erupting, exploding in flames. I thought about that. In fact, I haven't stopped thinking about it. Because that stuff, if it gets on your skin, wouldn't come off. It would just cling and burn. And God says, I'm going to give you endless life. But because you rejected my Son, you get to spend your endless life in a lake of burning sulfur. You'll never be able to die. You'll never be able to cease experiencing the horrors of being burnt alive. Now, who would ever do anything that horrible? God said, anyone who rejects the good news of Jesus will spend forever in the lake of fire. Let me ask you this. Where will you go when God looks at you someday? Mom won't be there. Your wife won't be there. Your husband won't be there. Your Sunday school teacher won't be there. Your spiritual leader won't be there to say, oh, they were pretty good. Just Jesus will be standing there, and he'll say, you never took my free gift. You were too busy, or something was more important. You didn't want to ever give up your sin. You didn't want to humble yourself. And he'll say, cast them in the lake of fire.